Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, stop me if you've heard this one before. Thank you for joining the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. I will be your host today on this Friday episode. So Aloha Friday for those of you who celebrate such things. As I've said before, I am a graduate of the incomparable Hawaiian Rainbow Warriors, University of Hawaii at Manoa College of Engineering. What a proud legacy I carry with me. It was a pretty legit school as far as the school experience. Not necessarily the most highest rank academically, especially in the engineering department, but I was accredited and I graduated, so that's all that really counts for that. Anyway, total sidetrack. Aloha Friday is the point of this. But it kind of leads into a little bit of, hey, have I told you this story before? Have you met or do you have somebody in your life that keeps telling you the same stories over and over and over? We've pretty much all had that experience, whether it's a coworker, maybe at work, a family member, usually in the certain age level, if you get my drift, that tends to repeat stories that have happened to them, that happened in their life. Maybe it's the classic glory day stories of something that happened in their past that they were super proud of, or this big accomplishment, some big achievement. That's certainly possible, but it's their go-to story. It's the story that they use usually or sometimes just to fill the silence, sometimes just to create some sort of engagement with you or with whoever that is that they're talking to. And sometimes because they don't know when to kind of shut up. They don't know when to let the other person speak, or they have a fear that the other person isn't going to continue the conversation. So they feel compelled to keep the conversation going in some form or fashion. And inevitably, because we all have just a certain amount of things that we can or will talk about, inevitably the conversation steers back towards a story that was previously told, and perhaps even previously told in that same conversation, which is kind of the worst case scenario of this whole thing, is when you are, say at some networking event or some, after work party where you're kind of stuck with that one talkative person and they start to repeat themselves and they go into this loop of not necessarily nonsense, but this loop of stories and experiences that you maybe don't have much interest in because they've given you no opportunity to kind of engage and have this mutual experience that's been all one-sided. Because that's usually what happens with these type of people that are in this scenario is it is very one-sided. They are definitely talking at you and not necessarily talking with you or having a discussion or even just enjoying each other's company. It's just you kind of listening to whatever happens, which goes back to the kind of classic example of, maybe an elder grandparent or an elder statesman in your community or in your church, whatever that may be, is you pay them that respect of listening and spending that time with them because that's what's important to them is reliving these kind of, quote unquote, glory days. But it also could be that that person is a little senile or they've got borderline dementia happening to where they don't even understand or realize that they're, circling back and they're coming back to these same stories over and over and over. But the big question is, and I hope you can kind of guess it, is this you? Because a lot of this podcast is about asking ourselves these questions of, what is holding me back as a business owner? What's holding me back as being this phenomenal leader in my business, in my company? What are the things that are, whether they're mental roadblocks, physical roadblocks, social roadblocks, anything of that nature that may be impacting and hindering you taking that next step or that next level of success in how you lead people, how you connect with people, and ultimately how you inspire them. And this is absolutely one of those things that if you are unaware of it, is a turnoff to other people when they are stuck, especially, after the second time or third time when it becomes apparent, because the reality of the situation is by doing this, being that person that speaks over and over and over, it becomes apparent to the other person that's listening to this that let's see if I can get my logic correct in this. You don't care much about hearing what they have to say, what the other person has to say. You just care strictly about making sure your story is told and reliving that moment or that event, whatever that story is about, and helping to include them in that. And it may not be pure out of, selfishness. It just may be out of like, this is the defining story of my life. This is the event that changed my life forever. Some massive fork in the road where that person had to choose left or right, and they want to, use it and share it because it was so monumental to them and life changing. It could be a near-death experience. It could be the classic, Al Bundy of, Married with Children, the old sitcom, where he was always talking about his high school football glory days, and I don't remember if he won state or whatever it was, but he was always talking about over and over and over about being that, high school football. And it's the same, Napoleon Dynamite with Uncle Rico, if I could only go back and, if the coach would have put me in, I could have won state. And, I bet I could throw this football over those mountains, and all those types of just crazy reliving these moments and events. And by virtue of that, telling these stories over and over and over and over again. And, Married with Children as a sitcom made it a comedic thing. It made it a quirk about that character, Al Bundy. But they also played up the other aspect of it, between his kids and his wife, and I think even neighbors and things, kind of just getting fed up with it, getting fed up with him telling the same story over and over and over. And the difference is, or a separation or a distinction that you have to make is, yes, you do need to have a story. You do need to have an interesting event. You do need to have something that is in your hip pocket at any time, especially if you're going out and meeting new people, if you're networking for your business, if you're going to conferences and seminars where there are other, industry partners or potential vendors or potential clients. You need to have something that is kind of your go-to. It's your story that you don't stumble over, but it's relatable. But you have that for a purpose, right? For that purpose of breaking the ice with that new person, with being that friendly character, bringing that likable character that other people will want to do business with you. They'll want to engage with you. They'll want to just carry on that conversation. But the difference is, people tend to move outside of that icebreaker type of a story, that funny thing that happened to you, whether it was, at an airport on your travel to a different kind of seminar. Oh, this thing happened to me and it was ah, ha, 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 right? And it's relatable and it gets people endeared to you in some form or fashion. And it's a get to know you type of a story versus having that not having the awareness of constantly using the same story in the same type of situation with the same people. Okay. This kind of likens back a little bit to my episode of, nobody cares that you were a fighter pilot. I had a supervisor, or not even really a supervisor. He was one of I guess he was my boss's boss, or boss's boss's boss, because there was an assistant. And every time I met him, of the 5 times that I met him, 1, he never remembered who I was, which is, that's kind of 101 bad on form on him. 2, I always was reminded by him specifically that he used to be a fighter pilot. Like, cool, it was interesting the first go around, especially with our shared military background, because I understand, I get it. That's a cool story. And it actually did kind of oh, that's really neat. He went through a lot of training and sacrifice and dedication and commitment to become a fighter pilot. It gives me a peek into his character and what he values and what he's about. But then the second time it was oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, it's really cool. Awesome. Right. But also that was, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was. And you at all are not that persona anymore. And then the third time and fourth time and fifth time that it happened, you're completely blown off and turned off by the entire thing, because you understand that anytime you talk with this person, it's not about us. It's not about me. It's about that person, making sure that you understand that they used to be a fighter pilot, right? Does that make sense? And you never want to get to that point if you are, the repeat story type of a person all the time. Especially the smaller your teams get and the more interactions you have, man, you need new material. You need to be able to have these shared and varied experiences and relate these shared and varied stories with your people in order to make that connection. It's no different than a complete lack of stories. A complete lack of interaction is having that same repeat interaction. It kind of achieves the same result of it's a turnoff. So yes, good news and bad news. Yes, there's a balance. You need to have something in your hip that you use specifically for getting to know you type of stories, whether it be a new employee. Although caution on the, did your new boss, as coworkers are talking to each other and they're talking about you, like, oh, did he give you the fighter pilot story, right? You can't have it be that to where it's so what's the word I'm looking for? Not transparent, but it's so rote in your process of how you greet new people that everyone kind of knows it, and they're like, oh, and it's not even that it's comical anymore. It's like, oh yeah, it's kind of pathetic, right? And you never want to get to that point in your business, especially if you are the leader, if you are the owner, you're the one at the top of this business food chain that you have going on, that people kind of disdain you for your repeatability and how much you have your go-to story, whether it be like a glory days type of story or anything else, right? So storytelling is an important part of how we relate to each other as humans, as just social beings, and being able to impart past experiences and shared experiences of some form or fashion, because the world, we all have kind of similar experiences at some point. We've all stepped in puddles and we've all been splashed, and we've been caught in the rain, and we've had embarrassing things happen to us and seen crazy things at airports and all those types of things that we can use to relate to each other. But we never want to hear about it over and over and over and over again because it becomes apparent that it's no longer about us, it's about you. Okay? Does it make sense? Right? Have I told you this before? Maybe I'll do this podcast again in a couple days and see how it goes. If you haven't seen Napoleon Dynamite, oh man, absolutely check it out. It is a different kind of humor. It's not for everybody. It's very dry pan, and I love it because I love dry type of humor. But there is that character, Uncle Rico, that is a great example of this in that. So yeah, maybe we'll talk about the next one of how do you handle somebody that's like that if you are in the position of, whether a leader to a subordinate or a leader to a client or somebody else, and you run into that situation. How do you handle that? That might be an interesting topic to discuss. If you want to discuss that, or you think that would be interesting, please, by all means, leave me a comment and say, yeah, that would be really cool, or I'd love some tips. Or if you have tips of how to handle that, that would be phenomenal. Or even just a funny story about this happening to you. That would be really cool to let us all know. Thank you for spending your Friday with me, or whenever it is that you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube. Have a fantastic afternoon, no matter where you're at in the world. Bye.